The characters of my story tonight are William and Susan Banks. They have a son, Timothy. Their butler's name is Jasper. The maid cook, her name is Elsie. And the story is centered around a little boy named Mikey. William and Timothy had a big falling out. William wanted Timothy to take over the family business, and Timothy wanted to continue doing his own things. And William got upset and stormed out. They hadn't spoken to each other or celebrated any holidays for over 8 years. And Susan, she has contacted him daily and keeps in contact with him. William has a hard heart and just won't break. So could we have the lights, please? One cold and snowy morning, the doorbell rang at the home of William and Susan Banks. Jasper, as usual, went over and answered the door, and to his surprise, there was a little boy. He opened the door and said, "May I help you, young man?" The little boy looked up to him with a big smile, stuck out his little hand. He says, "Hi, I'm Mikey. Can I shovel your snow?" "Well, hi, Mikey. I'm glad to meet you. Step inside and I'll go ask." So Mikey stepped inside and Jasper closed the door behind him and then went off to find Mrs. Banks. Mikey started looking at all the pretty things that were in this home. And like most little boys, everything he looked at, he had to touch. So he was putting fingerprints on a lot of things in that house. "Madam, we have a young man at the front door that would like to shovel our snow." Finishing her last sip of coffee, she set her cup down and stood up. "Well, Jasper, let's go talk to him." So they walked towards the living room, and when she turned the corner, she saw this little boy standing there. "Well, good morning, young man. I'm Mrs. Banks." And little Mikey looked up at her and with a big smile again and went out and stuck his little hand out again and says, "Hi, I'm Mikey." I said, "Well, Mikey, I'm glad to meet you. I hear you'd like to shovel my snow." "Yes, ma'am." "Are you going to do it all by yourself?" "Oh, no, my grandpa's going to come." "Well, I guess it just all depends upon how much you're going to charge." Mikey didn't even think that question was going to come up at all. So he thought for a little bit and he says, $5. So Mrs. Banks looked at Jasper and smiled, and she says, "Mikey, you have the job." So Mikey went outside and started shoveling the snow, and Jasper and Elsie and Mrs. Banks stood at the window watching this little boy out in the snow. And Mrs. Banks started remembering back when Timothy would play out in the snow quite often, how he would fight off all the villains from behind his snow fort with snowballs, and then take his sled across the frozen wilderness where nobody had ever gone before. And then she noticed something. "Elsie, come with me, please," she said, and they went upstairs to the old nursery, and they started looking through boxes and drawers and closets. Then she found what she was looking for. They went back downstairs, and she went outside. She said, "Mikey, I think you need these." She went over and she put a hat on his head, a little scarf around his neck, and a pair of mittens on his hands. "Oh, thanks. These are really warm," he said. Then she went back inside, and each of them went back to what they were doing before. And every once in a while, one of them would walk past the window, and they would look out to check on little Mikey. After about an hour and a half, Mrs. Banks went outside and said, "Mikey, it's time for a break. We have hot chocolate and fresh baked cookies." "Oh, boy," he said, and he went running into the front door. She helped him take off his boots, and they hung up his coat. Then she took him by the hand, and they went into the kitchen, and he got up in a chair and onto the table, and Elsie served him a big mug of hot chocolate and a plate full of cookies. And Mikey started eating his first cookie, and he's looking around the kitchen, and all of a sudden he said, "Hey, where's all the kids?" "Oh, we don't have any kids here anymore." "How come? Don't you like them?" "No," she said with a little chuckle in her voice, "we like them. It's just my son's all grown up now, and he's moved away, and we don't have any children anymore." "Oh, so you have any toys?" "Yes, he had some toys, Mikey." "Do you have toys, Mikey?" "Oh, yes, I have a truck and a car, and I make them go really, really fast." "I bet you do, Mikey. Would you like to see my son's toys?" "Sure," he said. "Well, you finish your cookie, and then we'll go upstairs." So Mikey finished the cookie that he started, and then he took another drink of hot chocolate, got down from the table, and took Mrs. Banks by the hand, and they went upstairs, down the hallway, past the old nursery, to the playroom. When she opened the door, Mikey couldn't believe his eyes. "Wow, all these toys yours?" "Yes, those were my son's toys." Mikey hadn't seen that many toys outside of a store before. Mikey said, "Wow, can I play with them?" "Well, sure, I guess for a little while." So Mikey went running in, and he jumped up on a horse, and then he got down, and he grabbed a train, and then a boat, and then an airplane. Then he tapped on a little drum. He played with stuffed animals bigger than he was. Mrs. Banks started remembering back when Timothy would play with the same toys, how she and Jasper and Elsie would put a hat on their head and play a kazoo and march to the beat of Timothy's little drum. And the best band there ever was, he called them. And then he would save them all from the wild animals in Africa on the safaris that they would go on. Then after a little while, she turned to Mikey and said, "Mikey, it's time we have to go back downstairs to finish your hot chocolate." "Oh, yeah, I forgot." So he gets up very sadly, set the toy down that he was playing with, and he started to walk back over to the door. And he passed a little table, and on his table there was a book. He reached down, he picked up the book and looked at it. He turned to Mrs. Banks and says, "Can I read this?" "Do you know how to read, Mikey?" "A little." "Well, sure, you can take it downstairs and read it." So thanks. He tucks it under his little arm, and he walked downstairs back into the kitchen. He ate 2 more cookies and finished his hot chocolate. Then he got down and he walked into the living room, sat down on the floor in front of the fireplace. A little while later, Mr. Banks came home. Susan told him about the little boy that was shoveling the snow and that he's waiting for his grandfather to come, and that he's sitting down in the living room reading a book. So William picked up his newspaper and he walked into the living room, and when he turned the corner, he got a little tear in his eye. Here was a little boy sitting on the floor, almost the same spot that Timothy would sit in. "Well, good morning, young man. I'm Mr. Banks." Well, Mikey turned around real fast and got up and ran over to William and stuck out his little hand again. He says, "Hi, I'm Mikey." "Well, I'm glad to meet you, Mikey. I hear you've been out shoveling my snow." "Yes, sir, but I didn't finish. I'm going to have to come back." "Oh, that's okay," he said. And then William sat down in his chair and he started reading his newspaper. And Mikey went over and picked up the book that he left on the floor and brought it back to William. "Sir, would you read this book to me?" "No, not right now. I'm reading my newspaper." "Oh, please, sir. It's got such pretty pictures in it, and I don't know all these big words." "No, not right now. I'm reading my newspaper." Well, Mikey was very persistent. He just climbed right up in William's lap. And Susan and Jasper and Elsie were standing in the doorway, and they just started chuckling a little bit. So William laid down his newspaper, and he took the book from Mikey, and when he looked at the book and saw the cover, he got a tear in his eye, because he remembered this is one of the books that he read to Timothy at night before he went to bed. So he started reading the book. Page 1, page 2, page 3, a little tear fell on his cheek. Page 4. Then by page 5, there wasn't anybody in the house that had dry eyes except Mikey. Mikey was off on a new adventure, learning about pirates and lost boys and magic dust that would make you fly, and a new hero called Peter Pan. Page 6. By page 7, Elsie was in one room sobbing, and page 8, Jasper was in another one sobbing. And Susan just stood in the doorway watching. By page 9, Mikey started to nod, and by page 10, he had fallen asleep. William held him for a little while longer, and then he went over and gently laid him on the sofa and covered him up with a blanket that was on a nearby chair. Then he turned and he went over to Susan and wiped the tears off her cheek and gave her a kiss. He says, "I miss Timothy." "I do too, William," she said. "I do too." They talked for a little while longer, then all of a sudden Mikey just jumped up. "My grandpa's coming, my grandpa's coming. I gotta go, thanks, bye, see ya." And before they could stop him, he ran out the door. They went out after him, but they couldn't find him. They didn't know which direction he went. It was almost as if he just disappeared. So they came back inside, and William went over to the telephone and called Chief Becker. Chief Becker was a good friend of theirs, and he just lived a few houses down. The chief came over and started taking down all the information about the little boy and his grandfather and all that went on there that morning. And then the telephone rang. Jasper went over and he answered the phone. And he talked very briefly and hung up and went to Mrs. Banks. He says, "Madam, Timothy just called. It's time. They're on their way." And she got a big smile on her face. She went over to William. She said, "William, Timothy just called. It's time. They're on their way. Would you please go with me?" Well, I can't go now. I have to help find Mikey. I don't want anything to happen to that little boy. No, William, Chief Becker said, that's my job. Timothy needs you right now. You go to Timothy and I'll take care of all of this. I'll give you a call back later and I'll let you know all the progress. So having said that, William and Susan went out, got in their car and started to drive toward the hospital. It was taking probably a little bit longer than it normally would because of the new snow and the extra traffic. But all the way there, Susan was smiling and thinking about all the exciting times ahead with the new baby. William, on the other hand, was thinking just what words could he say to Timothy to bring back all those lost years? Just what could he possibly say to take back all of his anger and pride and stubbornness? So he thought what he was going to say, and he changed it time and time again. Finally, they got to the hospital. And they went up to the room, and Susan went in first, and she saw Timothy, and she ran over, and she gave him a big hug and a big kiss. Then she went to Sharon, knelt over Sharon and gave her a kiss, and pulled up a chair, and the two started talking. Timothy turned around, and he saw his dad. They both just smiled, and when their eyes connected, they both got tears. They knew that at that moment, not a single word had to be said. All was forgiven. William then went over to Timothy and gave him a hug. He said, I love you, son. We'll talk later. And then in a short time, you could hear the doctor, okay, come on, push, one more time. And then the cry of a baby filled the room. And they all just smiled. It's a boy, the doctor said. Timothy went over and gave Sharon a kiss. And then he went back by the doctor, and the doctor handed him his newborn son. And he's looking down at this little baby in his arms. He gives him a gentle hug and a kiss on the forehead. And then he turned around to present the baby to his mom and dad. He holds his son up and he says, Mom and Dad? Oh, wait, I better change that. Holds his baby up and he says, Grandma and Grandpa, I would like to introduce you to your new grandson. His name is Jonathan Michael Banks. So he goes over and he takes the baby and he hands the baby to his dad. And he turned to walk over to Sharon, and then he remembered. Oh yeah, Dad, by the way, we're going to call him Mikey.